There's a movement brewing, and that movement is the MeTotal lifestyle.
It centers around you keeping your sense of self intact and in gaining clarity of purpose as you age. I'm Carrie.
I'm Joe.
I'm JM.
And we're on a mission to show you how to enjoy friends, fellowship, and life without substance dependence.
It's time to discover how you can begin living a MeTotal lifestyle.
Right here on the FUZZEE'ish podcast. Let's go.
Mike Hardenbrook is recognized for his novel approach to habit change, employing innovative neuroscience-based methods to foster personal growth. Over his 15-year career, media outlets such as NPR, Fox, and CBS have featured his work. Despite his professional achievements, Mike faced personal challenges in altering his alcohol habits. He found few effective resources to assist him. This led to him embarking on a journey of research and personal experimentation. From this, he developed groundbreaking strategies that combine the mind and body, creating a holistic approach to lasting change. Best-selling author and habit expert Nir Eyal endorses Mike's methodologies, praising them as a compelling guide to lasting change. Adam Contos, the former CEO of Remax, commends Mike's exceptional talent in delivering influence that brings about results and drives positive change. Dive deeper into Mike Hardenbrook's transformative techniques at hardenbrook.com.
Welcome back to the FUZZEE'ish podcast. I'm your host, JM Guthrie. Got my boy, Joey Q. We're joined by our friend, Mike Hardenbrook, for his second go at the FUZZEE'ish podcast. Really excited to have Mike back on the show today. Have enjoyed following him and his story and just all the things that he has going on in his life since the first time we had him on. If you remember, he wrote a cool book about alcohol and 66 days and trying to wire your brain through more of a neuroscience path to not drinking, which is a super cool story and something that aligns really closely to MeTotal. But the dude's got a lot of other stuff going on too, and also has been totally successful in so many other business ventures that we dabbled in. But just wanted to chat some more with Mike today, maybe have him on the show more often to talk about just the world that he sees in the various lenses and chat about ways that maybe we can improve what we're talking about on FUZZEE'ish and really the mantra around MeTotal. Mike, welcome back to the show, bud.
Welcome. Thanks, guys. It's fun to be here. You know, it's such a nice little refreshing thing to get an intro because, you know, I know we're just sitting here talking, but unlike normal face-to-face, you don't usually get the build-up people saying nice things about you. So
oh, man,
it's a nice step forward.
I feel like wives should do that every time we go to bed at night. And you know, he's done such an amazing job over these past 6 months. Yeah, it'd be pretty fun.
You mean yours doesn't?
I don't get the hype man stuff from my wife.
Yours doesn't?
Night. No,
Yeah.
I mean, Erica must be treating you well, James.
I mean, we have like the sign, you know, the
sign.
Yeah, no, I feel you. I think we've talked about this before. Affirmation is definitely my language, so I'm here for some good talk and some positive reinforcement. But yeah, totally, Mike. You're in a different venue today. You look like kind of the doctor in the first one, so that, you know, with the corner with your legs crossed. So I appreciate the more casual spot today too.
Got some Vegas vibes going out
Yeah,
that window.
Vegas
What's going
vibes.
on with that? Maybe it's just a little stickers on the window.
Yeah. I got the kids' Christmas stuff in the background.
Love
I
that.
decided to leave it up just to stay festive, but we got the Chicago skyline behind me.
Yeah, this
Coming
dude's
in
living
from
the
the
urban
27th
dream,
floor.
man. I follow him around on Instagram and some of his other channels. He's like out doing these cool city things in a cold Chicago city today.
That is literally cool. I don't know how actually cool that is.
No, it's
Yeah,
funny.
it's doing the opposite of what we usually do here in Chicago. We usually spend our summers here and winters in Scottsdale, but you know, we got married in October, so we just decided why not stay. We're kind of doing a year of nomad family travel. So this is
so cool.
4 months here, 3 months here. We're going to then skip out of the cold weather and head on over to Spain.
You're the second guest we've had on that's had a nomad lifestyle at some point in their life. I feel like maybe that's going to be catching fire lately. I don't know. We had Di Manuel who did nomad stuff out in Bali. I forget. I think episode 9 or something like that. But super cool, man. Super cool.
Yeah, we love it. I mean, it's not anything new for us. We've been doing this for 10 plus years. Usually we'll sort of get it out of our system, settle down for a few years, and then it comes back and you start planning. And we love to travel, but we especially love to travel where we end up staying and living like the people that live there. So whether it be in the country, in specific city, or a different country, it's just a whole different experience where you're actually going to the grocery store, you're living like your neighbors are, and it's a good experience for the kids as well. World is their classroom.
I mean, that I said the same thing to Di. I am in my head, in theory, that sounds super awesome. In practice, in the idea of, taking our 3 kids and my wife and I and our jobs and just going on the road. I think I would be okay. My wife is so type A and like such a planner and so rigid in her thinking that I don't think that's in our cards. But I want to keep hearing about your travels, because it certainly sounds awesome.
It's definitely comes with its challenges. It's not all the photos that you get to post. When you're traveling a lot, you tend not to stay in places that are quite as big as your regular home. So then you got kids that are a little bit on top of each other, including in your space all the time. Right. And you got homeschooling. But, there's a lot of upside. Like I said, we got all these world-class museums and installations here in Chicago, tons of parks and things to do and places that they've never seen. So, you got to weigh it. But it definitely comes with challenges when you have a small family. I'm not going to sugarcoat that.
What do you do with the kids? You homeschool them?
Yeah, Priscilla, my wife, does the homeschooling. They have much better programs now, since the pandemic. But before that, we would also travel with our kids, when they were younger as well, before the pandemic, and do the same thing, homeschooling online.
Oh, I know. My sister, JMG, knows my sister Kateri. She works for K-12 Stride, which is like the biggest homeschooling company in the world. So I know that their program has gotten significantly, better over the past 10 years.
Yeah, it seems to be. I mean, the kids seem to be scoring well. When my daughter's 12 and she's writing a book. So, wow. Go figure.
That's crazy, dude. So interesting. All of this kind of comes back to one of the things I wanted to dive into with you today. And you posted recently about sort of, for the first time, kind of taking a step back for yourself and figuring out what it is that you want to do with this next chapter of your life. And that it wasn't super clear at first. And so you were kind of going through different sort of personal journeys, but also going into certain experiences and having these conversations and kind of looking at your different opportunities. And I think it was a couple of weeks ago you posted that you sort of felt as alive and as sort of rejuvenated as you ever had. Can you talk to us about that? Maybe give us a little bit more color on the things that you had been sort of working through and where you're headed next, and just that experience generally. Super fascinating.
Yeah, sure. I can, as best as I can. It's probably a story that's still developing, but I would say it really started with the book that I wrote, and No Willpower Required. And that, as weird as it sounds, I started writing that for myself. I didn't really write it to put it out, but as it went on, and I started posting a little bit about it because I wrote it longhand. I had more and more people come to me. Oh, I love that. Got it right there.
Plug
for our YouTube audience.
Yeah,
No Willpower Required. Go get a copy.
Yeah.
So as that unfolded, I realized that there was really a demand, or other people like me, and so at a point I got to thinking, I really owe it. This is the book that I wish that I had. This is a book that I could have used, and so I really owe it to people to write this book. But nonetheless, I still had my day job. It's not like I can just say, hey, okay, this is really of interest to me. But as time went on, I realized that my passion really lies around helping people. Like, I'm mission driven and purpose driven to help people. And the way that I've always made money is through marketing technologies and softwares. And to be quite honest, that just does not get me up in the morning saying, yes, I can't wait to sell more marketing software to other businesses. So that really started kind of the path of,
what about technology services? Because that's what I do for a living. I mean, would that get you going? I mean,
I just don't think. I think it serves its purpose in my life, but I think some people get to a point in their life that they just realize they want something else. Maybe you call it a midlife crisis. I don't know, but
this is
I got
all
to a
hitting
point.
way closer to home than you even realize. And maybe that's for a future episode, but keep going, man. You're striking a chord, at least with one person in the audience who just happens to be on the show.
Well, honestly, that's all I really go for. That's anytime I post anything online or do anything, is as long as it can reach one person and make a difference. It doesn't matter to me, like, how many copies are sold or how many likes a post will get. Because, I mean, I don't even get that much engagement, but I could just keep doing it every day because all I hope is that I can reach one person and make a difference. So fast forward a little bit, things have come along and I'm really feeling like this is where my direction is going to be. So really, the book is launching next month. I'm planning on doing some more development of that work and potentially working with people on a one-on-one and small group basis. And I don't know if does that kind of bring us up to today with enough detail. I don't know what you ask me some other questions.
No, I mean, I thought so. I mean, I'll add a few things to sort of the question because my perspective was skewed by some of the commentary. So I at least was your audience of one on most of that. So your mission accomplished on a daily basis because I'm following along pretty intently. But no, you mentioned like other things more sort of active. So like it looks like you did some pretty significant mountain biking at some point in your life too. And those sorts of things are coming back as things that not only are still a passion, but need to be more of a priority. So it just feels like the work that you've been going through at a more general level is now also encouraging and enforcing things that have mattered to you in other chapters of your life that you're still passionate about, but you also want to have conviction about actually actioning on too. Which I think is something that people really struggle with and is an interesting sort of part of the story as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think there's definitely a transformation happening within me. And this is one of the topics that we talked about before we hit record, which is, some of my work rooted in psychedelics have definitely given me a different lens to view my life and how I view the world. And that has affected kind of the directions that I'm starting to take and the paths that I want to go down.
Yeah, it's a good segue because that's a topic that we definitely wanted to click in today too, was just this idea of psychedelics. And, I'll be honest and I'll say it as candidly as this. We're on a show where we talk about the detriments of alcohol and substance, right? And the ways that we can improve our lifestyle and really the lives that we live by removing the bottle from it. We're also not people that are going to judge and have been very clear on all of our episodes and really as a core theme of MeTotal, other people's products or practices that they choose that help them to remove the sort of bottle vice. That all being said, a person who's not informed is going to be like, what? You're not drinking, but you're, consuming psychedelics. Like, is that the same? Is that sort of the same path that I'm going down with the bottle? How is this better for me? Can you just for the novice, the person who doesn't know anything about it, kind of just give us a sense for what even this microdosing world is and what people like yourself are finding as the benefits to not only their personal, obviously, journeys, but also the interactions and the relationships that they have with others and just the world generally?
Yeah. Let me go back to some of the comments that you just made, which would be probably the questioning around deciding not to drink, but then also doing other substances. But if you think about it, a lot of it has to do with our social conditioning. It also has to do with the labels that we give to these, whether or not you want to call them drugs or you want to call them medicines, because these medicines do affect the mind. But they also, if you look at the spectrum, alcohol being the worst, and you have every drug in between, like something like psilocybin is literally on the lowest risk scale of that entire gamut that you have there. So I think it's really also about, if you're looking at medicines, then you would probably broaden that, and you wouldn't question whether or not a doctor would give you an antidepressant or an anti-anxiety or a lot of these other things that actually have much more uh, potential for harm. So I think part of that, when people go down that route and think about it, it just really kind of depends on how you view them,
Absolutely.
because, I guess drugs, illegal street drugs or whatever you want to call them versus medicines, I view them as medicines.
Yeah, no, I think that's, and I agree, actually. I'm a subscriber to that thinking as well. But people don't even, there's people that are going to listen to this show. So at least one of them is going to be like, psilocybin, what is that medicine? Can you, and I know that you're not a professor on this, but at least you know more, I think, than the other two of us on this show. I think it's a great opportunity to talk about, just at least at a broad level, what that world looks like and what folks like yourself are finding to be helpful in regards to that as medicine in their life for all the things that we've already, touched on today to some degree as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, psilocybin is our mushrooms, psychedelic mushrooms or some magic mushrooms, whatever you call them, even though that's not my favorite term. But I think it really comes down to, how do you use psychedelics? Do you use them in a recreational sense to disconnect, or do you use psychedelics as a tool to go inward, to change the lens? And then there's also things like psychedelics are a really good catalyst for creating neuroplasticity to then unlearn bad habits and ingrain new habits that are healthier, that make you live a more healthier life and a happier, more joyous life. So there's different ways that you can approach and use these, just like, for example, MDMA, or known as Molly on the street. Ravers and people that party are going to use that in a much different way than if somebody's in a therapeutic setting with a therapist and taking it in a controlled environment, set and setting with music and introspection and, covering their eyes. It's going to be a much different kind of use of the same drug.
Yeah, totally agree. And as I mentioned, really, I agree. And I find myself, and Joe and I talk about this, Carrie, as well, just about subscribing to the idea that these more natural substances or medicines are creating positive outcomes. And to your point, have the wrong labels or put into the wrong categories due to just society, as you mentioned as well. So we agree.
I got some notes if you guys want to get really nerdy.
Yeah, no, I was gonna. So I was just about. Yeah, so I was gonna actually ask you to go a little. So if you mentioned there's different ways to consume mushrooms or psilocybin, specific to whether you're just trying to use it recreationally to get away, or if it's actually going to turn into some sort of do they call it a program? When you get into these sort of microdosing strategies, is it what is the general term for sort of?
Is it like stacking supplements or something like that? Like,
what I want to make sure that at least I'm talking about it like I know what the heck it is versus.
Yeah, quite honestly, like psilocybin is not my go-to, and neither is microdosing, but I think it's effective for a lot of people. I've tried it. It just wasn't for me. I tend to go for the deeper experiences that happen few and far between. And I draw what I can and integrate what I've learned in those experiences in my life. But what I think is interesting.
So let me ask you, let me just make sure I understand that. So you would prefer to have like a big experience quickly and then be able to draw back to that in a more, sober state versus being in a consistent, under the influence of psilocybin.
Yeah. Well, the microdoses are sub-perceptual, which means you're not going to notice them. So it wouldn't be any different than, I think a good comparison would just to say, you're taking an SSRI or something like that. You're not going to feel it immediately. Over time, you might feel a marked difference. You might feel negatives. It just depends on who you are, or you might feel a lot better. I think the same thing goes from an anecdotal level, which, by the way, I'm not any kind of expert other than doing self-research for myself and self-experimentation.
And for us, yeah, and we appreciate it because you're doing it for us too.
Yeah. But I think, but yes, so to answer your question, I prefer more of like, I guess I'll say I'm all macro, not micro on my
Yep.
experiences. I like the bigger mystical experiences. And there's actually, in those notes that I'll tell you, some interesting studies that relate to that along with alcohol.
So before we get into your notes, if I'm if I'm if if I were to be interested in figuring out whether I liked micros or macros, or whether I liked mushrooms or Molly, or a macro experience, or where would I like? How do I? If we're thinking about it as medicine, are there doctors out there that are helping people to understand what the right prescription or program is for them? Is it, to your point, more of a self experience or self journey to find the right place using either community around you or probably the information you can find? Because that's the thing that I think is really important, that we're able to pull together as a message, or at least assist in a message for the people that are listening to this, is how do we make it feel more like medicine and more tried and true, or at least practiced, than just something that maybe they've had an experience with at a show or a rave, or with friends in college around maybe a bong too, or some other substances.
Yeah, for sure. There are, unfortunately, as most people know, it's still illegal, and mostly everything is underground. However, there are a lot of people in this underground that are formally trained in psychotherapy and other different therapeutic practices that have worked with these medicines for decades. Even, these things were made illegal, like in the 50s and 60s. However, like a lot of the work continued behind the scenes and was passed on to other people later on, so that you'll find, just because it's new, everyone that's working with it is not new to it. There have been people that have been fighting to get this legalized, which is finally sort of coming through its renaissance, and looks like it might be a very good possibility of many of these becoming legal in a therapeutic sense. But yeah, for right now, it's basically you have to maybe get lucky with somebody that that might be able to make an introduction to somebody. And in those senses, there are, just like regular doctors, there's good doctors and there's bad doctors out there. There's ones that are doing things that they shouldn't be, and ones that are life changing. And that's sort of the same thing going here, is that you would find somebody that you would work with that would be in a controlled setting. At least that's how I've always done it. I wouldn't sort of do self exploration by buying this on the street and like doing it at home. And that's not really the way that I work with this.
Yeah, and I think that especially when you start talking about it as being medicine and not something, a street drug, doing it in a controlled environment sort of aligns better to that than buying it on the street and then trying it out yourself, which kind of aligns to the other thing. I think that makes sense. One of the things that we're really working on bringing sort of to the show and centering around is outcomes, right? So what are things that our guests are seeing from an outcome perspective due to the decisions that they're making, due to the improvements in their mental wellness, due to having one less drink a night, due to having a few less drinks a month, due to potentially, not drinking anymore and stacking a bunch of days past even the 66 that you talk about. Talk about some of the outcomes that you can truly sort of tie to these experiences, right? And to the decisions that you've made to write your book, to have this self-reflection, to go on your nomad journey, but then also to find yourself into these macro controlled environments, to have these psychedelic experiences too. What are the positive outcomes that you're seeing, or even what are some of the negative outcomes that you're seeing? That's something that we're really trying to click into deeper here on FUZZEE'ish podcast.
The easiest go-to anecdotal, evidence would be from your own self-work. So, I mean, there are a lot of stories of others that I've heard, but I can easily tell my own, which was probably about 5 years ago. I went through well, actually, this is an interesting story. A friend of mine who I went to college with had an opioid problem, which I didn't know about. It developed later. And he had gone through many last ditch efforts, and it was really, a bad situation. And he went to Peru and did an ayahuasca journey, and it really just 180-degree turned his life around. And, he sustained that from that addiction for a very long time. But through him, he introduced me to somebody, and I had not ayahuasca, but what I ended up doing, and this is probably
Do you want
not,
to
yeah.
give the listeners, the one person who doesn't know, a quick, what is ayahuasca? Because somebody right now is
sure.
thinking, what in the heck is that?
Sometimes I get so used
it's
to things,
all
you
good.
just,
That's what we're here for.
you
Yeah,
forget.
right.
So ayahuasca is a combination of different plant medicine that's combined through a process in the Amazon and other locations, and it brings on it's hard to explain. It's like it's for a caveman that goes into the future and sees everything and goes back with limited vocabulary and tells all the other cavemen what he just saw. You just sound crazy trying to explain that experience. But I would say
That's a good
biggest thing it does is it does bring on a mystical experience. And yeah, so it's a very powerful psychedelic with its own. I would say you can't do that. You would never do that psychedelic recreationally. It is very spiritual.
Or plan a trip and do a whole 10-day retreat kind of thing.
It's ceremonial. You're not going to be. It's not euphoric. You're not going to be out there.
Is it in the
dancing
same
the night away like you are on MDMA?
Is it in the same world as peyote? Is it sort of in the
DMT, like that kind of thing?
So it is, but at its base is DMT,
right?
And it would probably be in the same sphere or universe. The experience would be very different, but still, So a lot of people go down there, down to Peru as a spirit quest, or looking for what's out there or what's the unknown.
Very interesting. All right. So sorry, I segued you off of your story.
That's all right. So fast forward, through him, I met somebody, and we weren't going to do ayahuasca. What we were going to do is something called 5-MeO DMT, which is the venom from the desert Sonoran toad. And, some people in mainstream media, like Mike Tyson, talks about how this changed his life, and a number of other people, but it's kind of like ayahuasca times 1,000. It's
stronger.
It is likely the most potent of all psychedelics.
Okay.
But it's very fast acting. It only lasts about 15 to 20 minutes, and your body metabolizes it, and you literally feel exactly the way you were before.
I've heard some of these little tiny windows, 15 minutes, can feel like 3 or 4 hours or 5 days and stuff like that. What was your experience?
Time is there's no concept of time in those psychedelic spaces. So yes, they could feel like 15 minutes. They could feel like days. They could feel shorter than 15 minutes. Yeah, you really don't. Well, you're not even in your body, so you're not thinking about the concept of time anyways.
Let me just go ahead and say, while you continue your story,
I feel like this is going to just scare people off, though.
No, it's not about that. No, I think people really. I'm hearing about these ceremonies in a lot of different venues. I'm hearing about them in my community around my house, and sort of what I would call my familial community. I'm hearing them all over the place in my social community past sort of that first level, and then, especially from an executive leadership, perspective, it's enormous in the professional world, and in particular in the sort of executive leadership. These experiences that you can go and do probably all different levels of these DMT experiences, and what the impact is on you as a human, which ultimately allows you to be a better leader or executive in the future. I subscribe to it because I know people who, like yourself, who have had meaningful, impactful experience in ceremonies that have then allowed them to have the outcomes that you're talking about and still telling the story. That said, for me personally, the idea of not knowing where time is, like, that generally just, it doesn't scare me. It's just like, I don't think I would like that. Right. I'm not sure that would help me. And maybe I'm completely wrong. And maybe we have to do a ceremony at some point that's not the most potent, that at least kind of leans me into
So
it.
JM is not a big fan of the afterlife. He doesn't want to go to heaven or purgatory or hell where time doesn't exist.
I mean,
Well, this is
religion's
relevant. Then let
yeah.
me jump in on that
Yeah.
because all my life, this is kind of funny, but I grew up, my mom's Catholic, and a whole nother story is that my mom was actually a Catholic nun for like 10 years. So obviously I grew up with God in the house, but I personally, as much as I wanted to believe, I just couldn't fully believe. And fast forward to this experience that my first experience is that I walked away with a definite, unwavering belief in God in it. And to this day, 5 years later, like that,
Wow.
that wasn't even what I was seeking, but that's what I got.
Wow. That's pretty profound.
Well, there's another outcome.
Yeah.
My dad, I mean, maybe my dad would send me to the ceremony because my dad is, as Joe knows, is
Conversion camp.
He's extremely religious and raised me in a very religious family. And I would say maybe I'm in the same place as you were 5 years ago. So if he's hearing this,
I don't go to church. I'm not religious, but I believe in God, after that experience. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, Huberman just came out as a Christian. Did you watch that? And recently on a podcast he was on, I don't know what his church going status looks like, but he prays every day. He reads the Bible. That's pretty interesting to me. One of the most famous neuroscientists in the world,
Yeah, no,
So-
I didn't see that, but that's interesting to know.
I've got a quick question. Shoot, I had lost my train of thought. Keep going. Sorry.
Yeah,
Well,
no,
I'm going
I-
to say
I-
something
go
because
ahead.
you know what? Like, I think some people might be thinking, well, why do all this crazy shit, right? Like, why would somebody do this? I mean, maybe they're a thrill seeker. Maybe they want to do drugs or something like this. But, after I wrote the book, I really, because these medicines have changed me in such a positive and transformational way, including saving my relationship. And now we're married. I attribute very much. I mean, I did the hard work, but it changed my perception of everything. And so I went to this conference after writing the book to keep learning more about where the future of mental health is going. It's called the Wonderland Conference. About 3,000 people come to this. This was in November. And you've got anywhere from underground people to mainstream medicine, pharmaceuticals, venture capitalists, you name it. You got kind of everybody that's got their eye on this industry. And so they had a lot of doctors there giving presentations, and a lot of them related to the effectiveness of psychedelics when it came to alcohol use disorder. And so back in the 50s, they did 6 trials with 500 people. And after they did just one dose, the people that didn't receive the placebo, the ones that got the LSD, were 2 times more likely to reduce their alcohol consumption. So that basically means like 60% of the people improved that took the LSD, and because they did placebo, and obviously placebo, when people think they're going to do better, 38%, but still basically double that if just one single dose. And these were people that were like addicted for 20 years, like reduced their amount of alcohol, and it was longstanding. For over 6 months, they tracked it. For the more modern one, this was interesting. So they did psilocybin, and these people were drinking like pretty heavily, right? And they gave them 2 doses over 4 weeks, and they reduced their drinking days from 45% of the days they drink heavily. After those 2 doses in 4 weeks, they instead of 45% of their days drinking, they went down to 10%. heavy drinking days, and that was tracked over 6 months. So a significant reduction just off one single dose of LSD or 2 doses of the psilocybin.
So what does
there's
2
there's
doses
definitely
mean? 2 different days, like you took it on 2 different days over that
Correct.
time period? Okay.
Right. So they spaced it 4 weeks apart. So they did one journey, they waited 4 weeks, they did another journey, and they showed that they went from like mostly half of their days were heavy drinking to down to 10%.
Well, see, I think I remember my question now. I'll set it up a different way though, because you went there. How different is doing LSD and coming off of alcohol than using like naltrexone? And and that's for those that aren't aware. It's like a pill you take over and over and over again to kind of wean you off of alcohol. My guess is the reason why the government doesn't want to FDA clear something like, microdosing LSD or even using LSD in general is because it's harder for them to continuously make money off of, like some of these subscription drugs or synthetic drugs are. What are your thoughts about that?
I think there's definitely truth to that. I think that's why also you're seeing pharmaceutical companies going to these conferences, because they know it's coming, and so it's probably it's either they get on board or they're going to miss it. I don't know how I feel about naltrexone now that you bring it up, though, because it really requires somebody to take it. It doesn't really change their habit, and I think the hardest part is getting people to take it. Right. Because if you want to drink, you got to take it, and then you're not going to have fun. And
yeah, it's putting too much control in the alcohol abuser's hand, not like monitoring them enough.
So in a non-medical readout, are they suggesting the reason that a heavy drinker after one of those 2 trials, whether LSD or mushrooms, is not drinking as much because they got really fucked up on that a couple times and that sort of covered what they were looking for? Is it a mental reset? Like, let's talk to what are people achieving, or what do they think people are finding through those journeys versus drinking that creates that obviously very significant change or percentage that you mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, just to clarify again, this is all just hypothesis.
Dude, we're here talking. Yeah, dude, we're not holding you as an MD.
So I think what I've learned is
basically this.
So I think there's a couple things. I think there's a biological element to it, and I think that there is also a psychological. So I don't, to your point of getting messed up and just feeling like I'm good for a little while, I think that it could be disproven, because look at the guys that go and get totally smashed on doing all kinds of cocaine. They're still going to drink the next day or whatever. So, I don't know that that's probably the reason. I think it's there's a direct correlation, number one, this was actually part of the study, is that the more the mystical experience that was achieved as far as the intensity, the longer standing improvement that they had afterwards with either lowering their alcohol intake or abstaining. So there has to be like this shift in the mind of basically looking at things through a new lens, or different pathways in the mind connecting. I certainly have experienced that myself. So I think that's one. I think you also have the proven element that neuroplasticity is something that you experience for a couple of weeks after a big psychedelic experience. And so if you come out of one of these experiences and you start putting into place good habits, then you can start to replace those bad ones. The same goes with if you come right out and you just start smoking a bunch of cigarettes, the next couple of days right afterwards, you could make it that much harder for you to quit than when you first did this experience. Yeah. So I think there's that neuroplasticity element.
There's a famous pop artist who talks about that exact example, in fact.
Oh, interesting.
We'll put him on blast here, but yeah. No, I mean, I wasn't so I will say mystic experience instead of getting smashed, because I think that obviously is the way to define it and is very different, right? Like, so if you're raging on coke and just trying to stay up all night, that's a totally different chase than what you're going for with a psychedelic. And I think what's interesting is however you want to describe it and what that direct correlation is to addiction or alcoholism. The reality is, it sounds like depending on the intensity of whatever that experience is, there's an enormous brain reset that happens due to probably a lot of different factors of the mystic experience. And if nothing else, and this is again me as a non-informed person who's listening to you and has obviously been talking to some other people about this, it's like you take the focus away from the addiction or the alcoholism, and you're like, holy shit, and now focused on all these other things that you want to make right or focus on to move away from the mystic experience or move back into a less mystical experience if you decide to not microdose like you talked about. Does that make sense? Does that sound crazy, or is that aligning to kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. I think to develop on that idea is that us as humans like to take on problems head on, right? And if we don't take them on head on, then maybe we find other ways to cope with them. With alcohol could be one of those things. What I found in the psychedelic experiences is there are ways to take on problems without a head-on experience or a head-on strategy. And when you find different ways to address issues within your mind that you might not even be aware of sitting there or hampering and causing you to have bad habits, you don't really address them. But in these experiences, there tends to be, in my experience, ways to, first of all, bring them to light, what you actually have to work on, and ways that you don't just have to, pound against the wall to knock it down. There's other ways, there's other paths around it that I've found. And then you come out of that experience being like, wow, I see that completely different than I did before. And I didn't even think that was a big deal, but it is. And so like for that, just for an example purposes, that those sorts of things I think all happen when you do these experiences as well, which let you kind of maybe address the problem at its root.
You think it could impact stubbornness? Because I feel like a lot of people's issues are that they just don't want to change in general, like the old habits die hard kind of mantra. But it sounds like what you're talking about here is that this opens up some channels in your brain and maybe allows you to be more open-minded to change.
Well, absolutely, I think so. Yeah.
I think the coolest thing for me, and this is something that I'm desperate to continue to talk to you about on this show and probably offline as well, is just how closely this aligns to what we want to talk about at a general level, specific to the MeTotal movement, in the sense that everybody's path to finding MeTotal or finding temperance when it comes to addiction, or even in particular alcohol, is different, right? Nobody is the same. It's like a GUID in computer programming or DNA. Everybody has something different. None of us are the same. There's no equal. And so It takes different experiences and different processes, and in some cases different products, and in some cases different medicines, for us to get to this place, which is what we call MeTotal, but is this clarity of mission, and this clarity of person, and this clarity of relationship, and this clarity of who we want to be, and this whole idea of one better day at a time, that I've been able to achieve personally by removing alcohol and talking to my therapist every week about the things that I struggle with, and him helping me to find the right things to focus on. And that's been enough. But for some, that's not. And I think what's so interesting about this is that everything that you talked about is just another path that helps people to achieve this world that all three of us are living in, which is this one of not non-alcohol dependence and clarity on the things that we need to focus on to be better people and better humans and better dads and better spouses and better colleagues and better leaders, and on and on and on. And that's fucking cool. And that's something that I've can't, my mind is blown to some degree about how closely all of that world, from the craziest ones down to the lower, more microdosed examples, are helping people to achieve a better life. And that's something that we want to be not just subscribers to, but also support around here. So I just appreciate all of that.
Yeah. I got to riff off that, is that probably my biggest fascination with the psychedelics is the treatment for people that maybe have tried other things and have not had the success that they're looking for. And I think that the research is really starting to develop now. But like you said, there's no one way. We're all different. So if AA works for somebody, awesome. If somebody has to go to an inpatient, that works, awesome. If somebody can read a 30-day book, awesome. If somebody can read my book, awesome. If somebody just needs an accountability partner or do a challenge,
here we are.
They all work, man. They're all in the same, like a lot of from the AA circle really doesn't like some of the other solutions, but and some of the other solutions might say the other directional, but in my mind, we're all working for the same purpose, and that is to help people get away from this thing that's damaging their lives and move into a better place to be the person that they see themselves as being, the best version of themselves. And so, yeah, it's a difficult problem, but I love that we're all talking about it.
Rising tide lifts all boats. I love it. Well, anyway, I know JM's got to get to another thing, but Mike, where can I send your Washington Mystics jersey? Because I feel like you're the mystical shaman of our show.
Yeah, man. Let's get him a Mystics jersey. I love that.
A Mystics jersey that you can wear
size. Yeah, I'm on that.
I'll send you my address.
Yeah, please.
We're going to get you a team sponsorship one of these days. You're going to be the most famous Mystics fan out there.
Yeah, dude. I mean, I couldn't agree with everything you just said more. And what honestly has me almost just a little shook is that everything you just said is the reason why we're doing this show. Like, there are so many people out there that feel like, oh man, I don't fit in the 12 steps, or, oh man, I don't have 30 days, or I've tried all these different things. I'm trying to do this through moderation. And the fact is, the same thing doesn't work for the same people. And so I love that this is another topic area and a branch of what we're talking about. So thanks so much for sharing and really being vulnerable around this topic. And like I said, I'm excited to talk to you some more about this, because I think it's going to be a big part of what we're doing.
Absolutely. 100% to everything you just said. Love it.
Yeah, love it. Cool.
All right, guys. Adios.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.